I have always been intrigued by games that try to simulate a fantasy store setting, be it old Flash games like Jack Smith or newer titles like Moonlighter. Potionomics is one of the latest entries in this semi-esoteric subgenre of potion shop simulators specifically. After playing the demo that was available a few weeks prior to its release, I was intrigued enough to actually buy the game the day it came out, which isn't something I tend to do that much. So, what was it that intrigued me so much? A few things. The writing was pretty good, and even in the demo I had a few genuine laughs with the game. The game mechanics themselves seemed interesting and fun enough as well, so I chalked it up as being an ideal candidate for doing a video on. What I didn't expect was the main story of the game taking me 20 plus hours to finish and for the story to be as mature as it is. So, without further ado, let's take a look at Potionomics. To get a bit of setup out of the way, your goal in Potionomics is to make and sell potions to pay off your debt. Kind of like Recettear or similar games like that. The entirety of the gameplay can kind of be summed up as a game of spinning plates. You need to make potions, to sell them, to make money, to buy ingredients, sponsor heroes, make potions for your personal hero quests to get more ingredients, to make better potions, to sell for more money so you can buy better ingredients, to make the competition potions and pay off your debt by winning those competition rounds. The way the game systems feed into each other here is a real work of art in my opinion, especially coming from Cult of the Lamb. Visually, I think the game looks good. The characters are animated well and have enough different poses to make it feel a lot more alive than some random visual novel for sure. Though there's no real continuation from one pose to another, so it can feel a bit jittery at times. The 3D character art design somehow reminds me of those Blender source filmmaker type porn animations, which is a compliment by the way, even if there is barely any adult content in or of the game at the moment, but at least you can romance any character you want, so it's alright. There are some minor animation errors however, the most noticeable one being on Saffron here, but only in this specific pose with her cheeks clipping into her mouth. Sadly, there are no cheeks clapping into my mouth. Then there's also a funny interaction between the text and the mouth movement. A lot of characters will say ... when talking about stuff to build anticipation and whatever. But most of the time their mouse will move to this ... which is just funny, honestly. And just a little quirk of the text-to animation system they've implemented here. Another strange thing here is how many different art styles there are in the game. You've got the character models, your hero friends have their picture on their little hero card, every character has their little map icon, a detailed image of them in your deck builder and another art style of those characters on the different cards you get. This is not an issue or anything, but it was something worth mentioning in my opinion. In general, I do think the game looks nice, it has this comfy fantasy town vibe to it, and it definitely looks pleasant to me. The music I also found pleasant, with different tracks for different characters and situations, most of them also changing depending on the time of day, with the music in the morning being a lot more upbeat and bombastic than the music late at night. Sound-wise, there's not a whole lot going on here. Most sounds are in reaction to stuff you do while brewing potions or selling them. There's no voice acting here, and the text scroll sound is very minimal. One small issue I did have with the sound design is specifically while selling potions. You play cards to pique the interest of the customer and such, and you can also apply debuffs to customers, which is beneficial for you of course. But the sound it makes when a customer gets a debuff applied is the same sound it makes when you get a debuff on you yourself, which was a bit strange, but nothing major and you do get used to it. In Potionomics, you play as Sylvia, a redhead girl fresh out of Potion College, inheriting her Uncle Oswald's potion shop on the island of Rafta. This island is a relatively new frontier, having been the base of operations of an evil witch queen named Maven, who was slain a few years ago by a band of heroes sacrificing themselves to finish the fight. After this, efforts to colonize this wild and untamed magical island began, with the entire ecosphere having been suffused by magic for all of these years. This resulted in some crazy monsters being found here, which is an excellent chance for the Heroes Guild to send out their heroes to kill rare monsters and gain epic loot. Oswald was one of the first entrepreneurs to come to Rafta to set up his potion shop, cashing in on the inflated need for combat potions and the like to aid heroes, but tragically died in a mysterious way, with him naming Sylvia as his heir in his will. This is of course a golden opportunity for Sylvia, being able to instantly put her theory into practice, if it weren't for the massive $1 million gold that her uncle managed to accrue, resting squarely on her shoulders and her soul, together with this ramshackle potion shop. That might be a bit of an expansive setup for the story, but trust me, all of it is relevant. Anyways, after being so bounded to the debt contract after being stressed to breaking by Helene here, an owl appears out of the rafters who offers you his help to get these Potionomics flowing. This owl, calling himself Owl, claims to be a former assistant of Oswald, from which he learned quite a bit, and he helps you throughout the game and functions as a tutorial guide in the beginning, teaching you the basics of brewing potions, buying ingredients, selling those potions, etc. Throughout the story he also helps you to file paperwork behind the scenes, and is just generally a fun character to have around. So, you'd expect this to go like Recettear or something, right? Make enough money in a week to pay off that week's payment and go through the motions, but Potionomics does put a spin on this. You don't need to make enough money by the end of the 10-day week. You need to make good enough potions to compete within a potion crafting tournament, with the total prize money for winning all 5 rounds conveniently being the exact amount of debt you have left to settle. So how do we make these elusive draughts of power, imbuing the drinker with inhuman strength and abilities? You simply throw some garbage in an old soup kettle and call it a day, of course. The actual crafting of potions is quite simple here. You have a cauldron with a limit on ingredient amount and magimin count, which is like the magical essence of the ingredients that you infuse into the potion, kind of like throwing a bouillon cube in a soup stock. Depending on the balance of the 5 types of magimins, a different type of potion gets brewed over time. Like I said, pretty simple and straightforward. The challenge here is mainly in acquiring better cauldrons and diverse ingredients, which start to get harder to balance out for more advanced potions, as a lack of balance in magimins will simply result in you being ratioed plus L plus you fell off. And the better the balance of the magimins, the more bonus quality the bottled potion will get in the end. Another thing to consider here is brewing time, with later game Big Dick potions taking like 12 time slots to brew. With a single day consisting of about 8, you can thankfully speed that up by fitting some fuel to the fire, which then costs money, which feeds into the entire system again. Time is a really important resource to manage here, along with your money, potions and ingredients. After acquiring only the strongest potions, there's 2 things we can do with them. The simplest thing is to sell them, of course, which we can do by arranging some potions on our shelves, building a deck with acquired haggle cards, and get on to the haggling part of the game. This part is quite straightforward, but also has its own depth to it. Obviously, you sell your potions to customers, consisting of both the characters you meet throughout the story, who have their own unique lines and animations, and the generic NPCs who both look and act in a more general way, though the randomly generated character models can look quite funny at times. Each individual NPC also has their own customer type, like being a commoner, for example, as well as having their own temperament, like being shy. The combination of these 2 traits helps to differentiate the actual haggling process, having different interest thresholds for raising the price by playing your cards, or them having their own zings they throw back at you to stress you out, which makes it harder for you to haggle as efficiently. This definitely helps to make the entire haggling section of the game not as repetitive as it could have been. The most important part here is to actually have a specific strategy in mind when building your deck, especially later in the game. You unlock new cards by building up relationships with those named NPCs you meet and befriend throughout the story, all of which have their own focus. For example, there's multiple ways of handling stress. You can block stress, try to lose it, or even embrace it depending on your deck. And once you get the hang of how the system works, haggling can be pretty fun and can become a quite speedy process, even if the whole system is turn-based. So after having survived our exploiting of desperate people in need of life-saving potions made with dubious ingredients by someone fresh out of college, we have some cash to burn, and we can spend it on a few different things, most of which we've already seen. There's an ingredient seller, Quinn, who starts off with a limited selection of ingredients, which you can expand by giving them new ingredients you have found elsewhere. You can obtain those ingredients at the Heroes Guild by either sponsoring general quests, which offer you 3 specific items you can sponsor a quest for, with an added chance of obtaining rare items of the same area if you invest more. This can deplete the local ecosystem, however, making ingredients exclusive to those areas harder to obtain through those expeditions, as well as making the monsters there weaker because they have less mutated 2-headed slimefish abominations to eat because you used all of those to brew some healing potions. The people potentially defeating those monsters are your personal heroes, specific named characters you meet who are employed as heroes for the guild. You can send these guys on a solo mission to a specific area to defeat some monsters and bring back their loot, which for you consists of ingredients most of the time. Sending them on their way requires a small fee, but without any help they'll only get a few enemies deep, if even that. So how do we make this more lucrative? Potions, of course. Instead of selling all of your potions, you can use them to equip your heroes with, which makes them a lot more powerful. Health potions to take more hits, mana potions to get farther into the area, elemental tonics to mitigate elemental damage, enhancers to improve loot quality and type, and cures to overcome specific obstacles. At the start, just some health and mana potions are usually enough to get them all the way to the boss of the area, but progressing through the more dangerous areas adds stronger monsters and more obstacles, requiring newer and more powerful potions. It's a neat system, but can get a little bit annoying at the end if you forgot to brew that one cure out of the 3 different ones you forgot you needed, or if it's one tier below the required one. It also hurts to see potions worth hundreds or even thousands of gold go through the system, but thankfully you are 100% guaranteed the outcome, being able to see how the expedition will go before actually committing to it, which is a very good addition to this. So now we have a horde of epic ingredients, we need some better equipment to use those in. There's Muktuk at the forge, who crafts better cauldrons, shelves, display shelves and later aging barrels as well. Cauldrons and shelves, being the most basic pieces of equipment you need, just cost money, but display shelves and aging barrels require specific ingredients on top of that money. Using those is completely optional, however, and just helps you in potentially raising your potion prices. We can also go to Saffron in the forest, where this laid-back free spirit does wonders with wood. Just imagine the handjobs she could give with that thing. Anyways, she can upgrade your shop by expanding the space you have for more cauldrons, shelves or barrels, so you can produce and sell more potions in the same time frame. She also sells fuel, and you're going to need a lot of that, so best befriend her to get a coupon. That's the basic spendings covered, but eventually you also unlock enchantments, giving positive traits to every potion you brew or sell in the day the enchantment is active, as well as marketing strategies, which raise the price of specific types of potions for the day that one's active. These are also entirely optional, but can certainly help if you plan them out correctly and can result in the big bucks. All of these capitalistic outlets you can burn your cash at are run by a gaggle of quirky NPCs, which, like I said, you can befriend, either by spending time with them, which is its own resource, or giving them the right gifts, like giving fish to these cat pirates who sell you loot boxes. This entire economic ecosystem is exactly the type of system synergy I was missing in Cult of the Lamb. You make money by selling potions, to buy better ingredients and equipment to make better potions that are more expensive, make potions for your heroes to go get more ingredients, talk to people to build relationships so they offer their services cheaper and give you more haggling options so you can make even more money, so you can expand your shop so you have more space to sell and brew potions, all with the lofty goal of making high quality, usually newly unlocked types of potions to win those competition rounds with those competition potions usually not being able to be made yet at the start of a new week with your old ass decrepit ass cauldron that has become completely obsolete. This is very good game design in my opinion, and the various optional systems it adds over your playthrough make it even better. You can even start farming your own ingredients by feeding one to a slime bulb, who spits out at least 2 of the same ingredient after a little wait, which you can improve further by feeding them more stuff. A perfect way to get rid of useless ingredients, as well as bolstering the supply of the ingredients you want or need. At the start of the game especially, it's also very easy to play into current events. If the day starts with an event saying health potions are more valuable, you can just pop in some A and B Magicmin ingredients in the morning, stoke the fire a bit, go socialize in the morning, come back, bottle the potions up and sell them for massive profits. This does get harder over time because of the increase in complexity in both potions and ingredients, so chances are you won't have the correct ingredients on hand to brew specific potions like petrification cures for example, and even if you go out to fetch some more ingredients in the morning, you'll need to really stoke the fire so your brew gets finished before the end of the day, which costs a sizable amount of cash in itself. Though there is a large amount of events that last for multiple days, so at least you can play into those still. All of these different events really flesh out the world in its own way too. They are usually random but have some neat flavor text to them, like "This one potion reviewer says this specific trait is utter cringe. Only sheep buy potions with that trait." Or "This alchemist claims overconsumption of mana potions causes ligma." Those have the effect of that trait having less impact on the base price of a potion, or that type of potion going down in price respectively. Some of these events are linked to your competitors trying to cockblock you during the story, while some of them are linked to those hero expeditions I mentioned before, with the ecosystems being depleted, influencing ingredient prices, monster strength, and loot drops. Custom orders also help in this fleshing out of the world. Customers asking for a certain potion combination with a flavor text like "Scientists say that taking a lightning strike to the face will unlock your brain power more." So the custom order consists of a thunder tonic, an alertness enhancer, and a mana potion to make this insane act a possibility and to actually survive whatever they're trying to accomplish. This was very cool to see for me personally, because to be honest, who wouldn't chug a few potions to pull an all-nighter and get some shit done, or slam down a few stamina potions to go for another type of all-nighter. There are, however, a few gameplay annoyances I have experienced that make it a bit less fun when playing for a while. Loading screens are plenty. They're usually quite short, but if you go on your morning shopping run and tick off every character to give them their daily gift or whatever, that's like 10 loading screens for that alone. Even just in your shop, you wanna go brew something, there's a loading screen for that. Wanna go customize your shop layout, loading screen. Or you want to customize the basement, another loading screen. Or you wanna go back up, another loading screen. When you're doing a lot of back and forth like this, it does get a bit grating. Some tooltips display wrong information, especially at Muktuks when you're ordering new equipment, saying I have one of something even though I don't. While customizing your shelves or cauldrons, there's no way to get the information about the equipment that's already on the floor. Visually, these pieces of equipment are distinct, but if you're not entirely sure whether that's the Ice Cracks shelf or the Arctic shelf, you have to swap them out to see. There's also no way to upgrade your equipment at Muktuks when the equipment is in your shop, which I guess makes sense, but it would be nice if it were possible when your cauldrons are empty or something along those lines. But as it is now, you need to swap out your cauldrons and shelves for older ones if you actually want to upgrade them, which you might not even be able to do as there's no way to check in advance what ingredients will actually be needed for that, which wouldn't be a problem worth mentioning if traveling to the forge didn't take up a time slot. So now you're wasting valuable time going to the forge to maybe upgrade your stuff, or maybe just waste your fucking time. A few quality of life things I did miss were maybe things like templates, for example, both for potions and for haggling decks. Perhaps a system where you can brew your potion and save that specific combination of ingredients to a list, so you can quick brew that specific potion in the future if you have the required ingredients laying around. This would still require you to make most potions by yourself, especially when you get new ingredients, but when you just want a batch of health potions, it can get a bit boring to keep adding the same ingredients by hand over and over again. Same with maybe fuel combinations. Haggling deck templates would be a nice addition too, and could allow you to make decks with specific strategies to quickly swap around from day to day, or make a deck for the tournament rounds in advance instead of having to change it up right before or during the match, which at least you can do, so that's not a big issue in itself. All of these issues are pretty small, of course, and the amount of these smaller issues is limited. But I am firmly of the belief that a lot of smaller, nitpicky issues are or can be as bad, if not worse, for the overall enjoyment of a game as a few major issues. Then possibly my biggest gripe with the gameplay is the lack of filters and sorting, is what I was planning to say in this part of the video, but these have since been patched in a recent update. Props to the developers for listening to the community feedback on these quality of life issues. They even changed up the visual style of positive and negative traits to make it easier to differentiate them aside from just their color, so it looks like they are definitely keeping the interests of the audience in mind, which is very good to see. The one change I would still like to see is the ability to sell your stuff though. At this point I'm convinced this will just be added in another update down the line, so I'm not as annoyed by it anymore, I guess. But the problem right now is that you can't sell anything. For the ingredients, that's not a big issue because usually you're just using up your ingredients, or you can feed them to the slime bulbs later in the game. But stuff like shelves or cauldrons or aging barrels, you can't sell. So your inventory does get cluttered over time with just equipment you don't need anymore and can't be upgraded anymore. So they're just completely obsolete. So I guess that's it for the gameplay section of the review. I'm now going on to the story and character section. So if you're not interested in that or don't want any spoilers, because I'm just going to spoil right out of the gate, you can just skip to the end of the video. I'll put a timestamp on screen or, in the chapter, so you can just skip to that if you don't want this. I absolutely loved the writing in this game, way more than I expected. Some may call the writing cringe, but I call it based. Due to the cartoony and upbeat look and feel of the game, I have assumed it was just going to be very light-hearted all throughout. But it does touch on some quite serious topics and relationships, though it's not anything near gritty and dark or anything. You don't see people get dismembered or whatever, So like I said, spoilers from this point on. If you don't want any spoilers, just skip to the end of the video. I would section off the main story and the individual character stories and the non-spoiler and the spoiler parts of the story, but some of them intertwine with each other and it's all connected, so I'll just go through it in one tangled mess, which is just easier. Owl being Oswald is obviously no shocker. I suspected that basically in the first few days, but it seems to have been the intention. He himself confesses this to Sylvia about halfway through the game, which was very welcome, because this resulted in Sylvia actually being mad about it and Oswald giving her some space. Pretty mature. Then after that, they actually start to reconcile, with Oswald still recognizing he screwed his niece over and admitting fault, and Sylvia not entirely forgiving him yet. But both start to work together again because they genuinely like each other's company and each other's expertise. This is so mature you could put it under the cougar section. Now, the game as a whole doesn't necessarily have a political agenda or anything like that, but it does seem to lean in certain directions on certain topics. Probably the most overt message here is one against capitalism and specifically exploitation. Anubia as an antagonist is literally just Jeff Bezos but as an Egyptian lolly queen. Corsac and his slime bulbs also convince you in gameplay terms that sustainability is a good thing, which we also see in the damage to the ecosystems you can cause by overspending on those hero expeditions. The main driving motivation of Sylvia is getting out of debt. Most people you meet aren't in it for the money itself. Muktuk just wants to make enough money back so he can continue his craft, and Saffron is literally half a tree herself, etc. This is not to say that this game is anti-capitalistic propaganda or anything. Sylvia herself is always very happy to get discounts. Making money is always encouraged, and I think it's mentioned that this whole hero business does wonders for the local economy, but the overall message is quite clear. Through the various background stories of the individual characters, you also start to learn more about the setting as a whole. Mint, who's absolutely obsessed with heroes to the point of writing fanfiction about them, recounts the story of her meeting her first real hero, who literally just planted monsters himself and then offers to get rid of them for money. So he was just a fraud. She also has very nice muscles, and I wish she'd peg me. Saffron is possibly the most interesting one, as she was part of the hero squad that actually vanquished Maven all those years ago. Though she was injured after defeating the Kraken, I think, and didn't actually go to Maven's castle. She recounts that the expedition itself was undertaken under false pretenses. The Heroes Guild at the time painted this island as being an evil lair of an evil witch queen who enslaved and tortured the local populace and was bent on destroying the mainland or something along those lines, while in reality it was more of a refuge for outcasts and a large testing ground for magical experiments, nothing too doomsday about it. Even Maven herself, who is the lizard that accompanies Robin, obviously, claims that the reason the area around her castle is so devastated, as well as the reason all of the heroes died after fighting her, was actually the heroes' fault, by mishandling parts of her laboratory and causing the explosion themselves. But that is something she would say, of course. Maven being so hell-bent on revenge during the finale makes it seem like she wasn't all that good either. But the way this story and its background is told as a whole really puts to light what historical revisionism and such could look like. This is why I found the writing so interesting. There's a lot of different perspectives from quite mature characters on quite serious and semi-realistic situations. Baptiste coming here to run this branch of the Heroes Guild is something he does out of his own free will, but he is part of the family that owns the entire organization. And being a third son of a noble family didn't open any doors for him anyways, but he genuinely tries to be a good asset to the guild in Rafta. Now, not every story is super serious here, of course. Muktuk just wants to make his magnum opus, which is this cultural obligation of his people, which is cool to see. Salt and Pepper are literally just pirate cats and are plain mischievous, but have their own fairly dark past, and so it goes on for every character. I've only mentioned the ones I actually got pretty far into, but I can only assume the other characters and their stories are as interesting as the ones I mentioned and saw. Like I briefly mentioned at the start, you can romance, to my knowledge at least, any character you want, maybe not Salt and Pepper, just by flirting with them enough when the choice is presented. Actually beginning a relationship with one of them after they confess their feelings to you is optional and doesn't really change anything gameplay wise as far as I could tell. It just adds some different lines to the interactions with them and some different animations too, I think. Like, for me it was Mint who I accepted the romance with, and every time you meet her she just blushes a bit more. Something along those lines, you know, quite simple. Now, there's one other political thing here I'll mention briefly. Yes, you play as a woman, and yes, most of the characters you meet and can romance are women. This, of course, means the game is filled with woke shit, of course. Quinn is a they-them. Mint has 2 dads. She's black. This walrus guy wants to fuck you with his fat walrus cock. 0 out of 10 shit game. But in all seriousness, I don't really care. This stuff is not overt, it's not preachy, and you can always romance just the human male characters if you want. And while I almost expected the possibility of a polyamorous relationship or just multiple relationships, when you're spoken for, and the other characters accept and respect that. Anyways, the main story as a whole is pretty decent, I suppose. Like I said, the interactions between Owlswold and Sylvia are nice, and the game certainly doesn't treat its obvious twists as being super shocking, with both Oswald and Maven saying something along the lines of "you must have expected this, right?" The Maven Bloom being the ultimate prize was obvious from the very start, or at least from the moment you found out Owl is actually Oswald. The ending is nice enough, with the final tournament round actually having me on my toes and legitimately thinking I was about to lose. The only strange thing here is how the Maven reveal is handled afterwards. She literally mind wipes the entire crowd to redo the final round over again, and then just leaves with Robin after admitting defeat. I don't think any of the characters know or realize that Maven is the lizard, aside from Sylvia herself that is, and then she offhandedly mentions she was planning to sell the cure potion to Maven for an exorbitant price. The whole thing with the Maven Bloom being absolutely necessary for the cure potion is also a bit weird, since it doesn't really line up with how you've been brewing potions all this time. Everything so far has been about Magimin ratios and nothing else. And now suddenly the actual ingredient is important too? Only makes sense it's brewed off screen then, I suppose. The game ending with a similar situation as at the start, with Sylvia haggling with Helene, but this time being an absolute pro in it, was very nice as a closer too. I don't know what you would call something like this, I'm sure there's a term for it when the end mirrors the beginning like this, but in a different way. But it's very nice and I definitely liked it. What I don't like is the lack of anything past that. If you beat Robin/Maven at the end and go through the ending sequence, you're booted back to the main menu after the credits. And that's it. There's no free play to keep building up the relationship with the rest of the characters or any other activities you might still want to do. Which sucks, because looking at Steam achievements, there is one for maxing out the relationship with basically everyone. And I have no clue how you're supposed to do that and still make enough money on the side to actually progress through the game. But I guess that's something for an eventual second playthrough, I suppose. In summary, I genuinely liked this game, even with its minor flaws here and there. For a 25 currency indie game about making and selling potions, it was more and better than I expected at least. The game looks nice, sounds good, plays well, and is fun to go through the story and the characters. So I implore you, pick it up if it looks any good to you. Or just wait for the Christmas sales or something, I don't know. I would also implore you to please make some Kino adult content of this. The characters are designed well enough for that in my opinion. But anyways, that's it for me. Thanks a lot for watching. Hopefully the video didn't drag on for too long, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.